Eastern and Western Ideals of Happiness, an essay by Bertrand Russell. Russell was born in Wales on the 18th of May 1872 into an aristocratic family, but his father died when he was very young, and so he was brought up by his grandparents. He went into residence at Trinity College, Cambridge in 1890 to study mathematics. During this time, he also developed a keen passion for literature and philosophy, particularly logic and epistemology. He then published The Principles of Mathematics in 1903, where he argued that the whole of mathematics was nothing but logic and could be derived from only using a few simple logical axioms. Russell was very politically active and outspoken, and was one of the few intellectuals who engaged in pacifist activities. He took an active part in the No Conscription Fellowship when the war broke out in 1914, and he was fined £100 for writing a leaflet criticising the 2-year prison sentence of a conscientious objector. Then he received a 6-month imprisonment for a pacifist article that he had written in the Tribunal. Finally, in September 1961, at the age of 89, Russell was jailed for 7 days in Brixton Prison after taking part in an anti-nuclear demonstration in London. This would be his second and final time in prison before his death in 1970. Skeptical Essays was first published in 1928, and it offers a defense of skepticism and explores key philosophical issues of freedom, happiness, emotions, ethics, and beliefs. Today we'll be looking at chapter 8 of this book, which explores the differences between Eastern and Western ideals of happiness. Russell begins, "If I were to try to sum up in a phrase the main difference between the Chinese and ourselves, I should say that they, in the main, aim at enjoyment, while we, in the main, aim at power." Here we can see that, in the West, happiness stems from power. This can be seen in the form of states, which represent the power we have over other men, and our obsession with science, which shows our desire for possessing power over nature. However, in the East, happiness stems from enjoyment. On the societal level, this means that they desire a stable society that reflects on what it already has, and along with this, it learns to value the things that it has already achieved. However, in the West, we focus on non-stop progress and hardly ever take time to reflect. More on this later. For the individual in the Western world, their happiness stems from being energetic, industrious, and hard-working, whereas in the East, they are less work-oriented and instead, as said by Russell, to have an infinite capacity for leisurely amusements. For example, going to the theatre, talking while they drink tea, admiring the Chinese art of earlier times, or walking in beautiful scenery. This results in, quote, "freedom for all and a degree of diffused happiness which was amazing in view of the poverty of all but a tiny minority." The next important dichotomy between the Eastern and Western ideals is their view on how society should be oriented. The West are key believers in progress, even insofar as they pursue progress for its own sake and not even for some ends that it might entail. Russell states that they love the hustle for its own sake. But we may become so busy progressing that we never have time to reflect and see if we are actually any closer to our initial goals. Some of the progress that Russell is referring to here ranges from making ships, automobiles, telephones, and other means of living luxuriously, along with making guns and poisons and airplanes for the purpose of killing each other. But the problem is that we assume that the changes we've made over the past century have been unquestionably for the better. But upon closer inspection, we may realise that we are actually no closer to our initial goals and may still not be heading in the right direction. It is of paramount importance to reflect and reorient ourselves regularly when we are striving towards a goal. On the other hand, the Chinese do not admire activity unless it serves some useful purpose. They will only attempt to make progress if they see it as achieving some valuable end, whereas in the West, progress will be made even if no clear end can be seen. Confucius, the famous ancient Chinese philosopher, aimed at creating a stable society, maintaining a certain level of excellence but not always striving after new successes. They aim at being grateful for what they already have achieved rather than always striving for more. In the West, Russell states that we have two kinds of morality, that is, we have one to practice and one to preach, whereas in the East, they have one system of morality, that is, they practice what they preach. In the West, Christianity takes mysticism and philosophy to a level that is beyond human understanding. This means that the Christian ethic is universally admitted to be too good for this inherently wicked world. The complex theology means that we find it hard to know exactly what God wants of us, and so it is hard to confidently practice the teachings, and so there is a large difference between what one practices and what one preaches. On the other hand, the Chinese follow the simple and practical teachings of Confucius. Here, it is much easier to follow the core teachings because they are much more clearly applicable to one's daily life and one's interaction with others, and they do not involve as much complex mysticism and metaphysics as Christianity does. Some of the main teachings of Confucius are those of moderation, politeness, and having a pacifist attitude. Both Christian teachings and Eastern Taoist philosophy do, however, believe that one should return good to evil. However, their views differ on how good and evil arise in human beings. In the West, due to Christianity's doctrine of original sin, we usually take the view that one is born wicked and has evil deep within them. But in the East, it is taught by Confucius that one is born good. Firstly, in the West, Christianity teaches us that morality consists of denying one's own natural impulses, mainly that of lust and sexual desire, and foregoing ordinary pleasures and making others do the same. A consequence of this is that every disagreement is a matter of principle, that is, something core to one's nature, and so if a disagreement occurs, it is taken very personally and the other person is viewed to be evil and wicked to their core, relating back to the idea of original sin. Overall, we can see that in the West, moral precepts are negatively based and are focused on evil, corruption, and the dark side of the human soul. On the other hand, Confucius taught that men are born good, and if they become wicked, it is through the force of evil and corrupting manners. Man still remains forever good at his core, but he may be deceived by his surroundings to perform bad actions. Also, the absence of original sin means men are much more willing to submit their differences to argument and reason because they know that the other person is good at their core, and thus an aura of compassion and understanding can arise between them, even during disagreement. Overall, in the East, we can see that moral precepts are positively based as opposed to negatively based. That is, we are all born good and will always retain this goodness in our core. Russell concludes, "If the whole world were like China, the whole world could be happy. But so long as others are warlike and energetic, the Chinese, now that they are no longer isolated, will be compelled to copy our vices to some degree if they are able to preserve their national independence. But let us not flatter ourselves that this imitation will be an improvement." This final line reminds us that just because it is Western ideals that the world must submit to, it does not mean that they are good or desirable. Thank you for watching, and please leave a like and subscribe. See you next time on Feeling Philosophical, and goodbye.